Live streaming is on.
Hello, everybody. We are here in the presence of two geniuses. One of them is not me, so you know. I mean, what's the name? I don't know. Oh yeah, you too. Who are you? No, seriously. I am here with my two dear friends and impossibly, amazingly talented people. But above that, incredibly amazing human beings, which I love, as they know. But I can repeat it, and I will. I love them both to death. My friends REINHARD KLEIST. How are you, REINHARD?
I'm fine. I'm very happy to be here with in our little bar, and we can. Is that milk?
No, not precisely. You know me enough.
Exactly. What is that?
How are you, Aimee?
I'm fine. Good to see you. Good to see you too, Reinhard. Good to see you both. And yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, this is the most social I've been since 3 months, I think.
Which is good.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of people. No.
Not that they deserve it.
Maybe you're right.
Hey, you're a comic creator. You all guys are allowed to be antisocial. It's in the genes, you know. It's a way to stay home and work. It's like, I hate people.
There's a lot of my friends who also make comics who said to me, I don't really, I'm not experiencing a lot of differences in this lockdown. I don't see people. I stay inside. I don't go to parties. It's the same.
Well, but most everybody go REINHARD, please.
Yeah, well, my life really changed a lot. Well, usually yes, I'm working in my studio, but I also do a lot of traveling and going to places with the Goethe Institute, and I also do the live drawing concerts, and everything is cancelled until autumn, and so this is for me it's kind of a difficult situation because I really rely on that for my mental stability and also my income, and
Absolutely.
so that's basically cancelled. So I can completely focus on drawing now, like I finished a big part of my next book in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of graphic novels next year.
Don't say it, Aimee. He's third book in a week.
You wanted to proofread it live.
Yeah.
Was that the idea?
Yeah, you know what, Reinhard, I'm always so jealous of your speed of working. It always seems like if you finish a book, then you also finish 2 other ones in the same week or something. Or one book comes out and there's 2 more. I don't know how you do that.
That's just an impression. I'm just very good at acting.
But are you guys overworking? Be honest, because a lot of people who I talk to in this chats, if there's no interviews, that's what I won't use the word interview, as you know. In this chat, shit. Sorry, forgot to close my email, people. That is it. Have you overworked? Because a lot of people have told me that not wanting to, not realizing it. Even when we consider art is still, stay at home and work at home or at the studio most of the time. So this is what you guys do. They have realized over the past few months or weeks, they look at the quantity of the work they have done, and it's like, shit, I've done a lot more than usual. And I didn't even think about it. I didn't even intend it. It's happening to you guys? And if it's happening, why? If there's a reason.
For me, it's funny, actually. I had a lot of freelance jobs. I also do storyboards, for example, for television. And I also do animation and that kind of stuff. And those jobs were canceled. So all that I was left with was my big book, the next book. And I realized when all those things were canceled that actually that was way too much work, that I had said yes to too many things, because now I'm working on the book full time and I can't even make my deadlines. So imagine if Corona did not happen and what kind of shit I would have been right now. So I wouldn't say thank you, Corona, but I guess it's kind of a new insight for me that I should, choose my projects wisely and not just do everything that comes my way. So that's a lesson I've learned this period.
Hey, think about it this way. We are supposed to become better people because of the virus, blah, blah, which we are not. Let's be honest. Streams are more streams and assholes are bigger assholes. But we learn lessons, and that's one of them. Let's be positive. Let's be positive.
That's what I also try to get out of the situation is to think positive about things. So right now I'm ahead of my schedule because I have so much time to work on the pages of the next book, and my editor is in trouble because I'm sending him all the new pages and he doesn't have time to do the proofreading, and and so it's like what I learned now is to make the best out of the situation for myself. So now I have the time. Now I do all the things that I can now. Then I have more free time when hopefully the situation gets a little bit more calm and things get back to normal. And maybe then I have a lot of these travels and invitations that were just postponed and not cancelled. So,
no, you will just do another book. I know her face. Her face is saying that. Aimee is saying, no, he's doing 2 more books because he has more
time.
So, Aimee, what is what you miss the most? Going to the movies, hanging out with friends, drinking like crazy. I don't know, going to the beach, going to whatever. What is what you miss the most?
I think what I miss is the simplicity of life or something, just going to a place without thinking twice, going to the supermarket without standing in line and wearing masks and gloves and all that stuff, just the easy life. And at that time we didn't know how easy it was, but I can really miss, just living without all these rules. And one thing I really miss also is just taking my car and driving up to Belgium or France or Germany. We are very lucky in that way that in Europe you can just drive and cross borders and stuff. And suddenly all the borders were closed, and it was kind of strange, all these police officers at the border checking you and asking you where you're going and why. It was surreal, right? So I kind of miss that too. Because I used to go to Belgium a lot to see friends, and now I just stay in my own little country.
Here we have a pilot program, a test program that is with Germany. It started yesterday. I don't know if you know this, Reinhard. It started a test program flights from Germany to Spain. So it's the first test flight for tourism.
I didn't get it.
It started yesterday. It started a test program for tourism in Europe. And between Germany and the Balearic Islands in Spain, Mallorca and all that. And that works, it'll open to Canary Islands and other parts of Spain. So we are in a big way. We are like, cross fingers.
I think it's the first time that people on the Balearic Islands are happy about German people coming.
You said it, not me. Could be worse. Could be worse. Could be the British.
Could be worse. Yeah.
Could be the British.
They could come with other intentions than just like.
No. I'm serious. The Germans are not famous for the balconing. You know what balconing is?
That's staying on your balcony.
No, I'm not kidding. I will show you videos afterwards, and this is true. The British kids, they come, they drink too much. They cannot handle it.
Oh, they jump from the balconies.
Yeah, they jump from. I'm not kidding. They jump from one balcony in a hotel to another balcony, and a lot of them, of course, die or get crippled, etc., because they are so drunk and just jump. So the balcony is something really common between the British tourists in the Balearic Islands. That's what I was saying. It could be worse. It could be worse. And what about you? What's Reinhard? What is what you meet the most? I think you said it already. Hang out with friends and all that. But aside of the financial part of it, from a personal point of view,
I have to say that the situation at the moment in Germany is quite back to almost normal. I mean, you have to wear masks and you have to do the distancing, but you can go to places. And I even went to a museum 3 times, and you have to obey some rules, but you can adapt to that. And yeah, what I miss the most is at the moment is traveling, going to some places, and I have to say, when the whole thing started, it has some kind of fascination when you live in a big city and you go on the street and you realize how much the city is closing down. And I went with my bicycle a lot of times to places. I visited Potsdamer Platz or the airport, and suddenly you realize those places are empty. And it really looked like a dystopian movie.
Yeah.
So that was entertaining, I have to say, for a while. And then after a while, you realize, oh my God, this will last longer than you thought. And somehow everybody has to adapt to the situation. And yeah, what I miss the most at the moment is this thing of stability, that where you have your life and you said, okay, this is going on like this, and you had plans for the rest of the year, and now you're in a situation where you don't know anything, and you cannot. For example, I really want to visit my parents, and I cannot do that because they're afraid. And those are those little things that are adding up to a situation where you have the feeling like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to stop. So can we please stop the whole thing now?
When I had Olivier Coipel here, Olivier, the artist, French artist, he lives in Lisbon, and he was telling me like 1 day, 2 days before the lockdown started in Portugal, he went to the center of Lisbon. He lives in the outskirts, and saw it empty, and he had that sensation of panic. Like, I couldn't even explain it. I was there. I just looked around, saw that everything was empty, and I have to go. I have to go back home because the panic took over. That sensation of, oh my God, if I stay here, something really bad is going to happen. And he was like, my brain was telling me nothing's going to happen. No, there's nobody around. But the animal instinct, I guess, took over and said, get back. But here I have the same thing. If I want to go, if I was in Galicia, you can move around because there's new normality. But Barcelona is still phase 2. So if I want to go out, I can't.
Oh, really? Still?
Yeah, because Barcelona and Madrid are still phase 2. They are the only ones.
Yeah.
Because the thing hit the most in Europe, it was Barcelona, Madrid, and Milan, I think, because they are 3 of the most of the 5 most densely populated. So when it hit, how it spreads. When it hit on those 3, you just are fucked, So that was it. But the other parts of Spain, depending on each part, is phase 3, phase 4, whatever. But Barcelona is going to enter phase 3 on Monday, and I think Madrid too. So they are, a couple steps behind, just because they have the most cases, and the government wants to be, if we open those too soon, we'll have, what happened in other countries, the rebirth or whatever, resprout of the virus, because we didn't wait until we had the means to stop it. Madrid and Barcelona are reinforcing a lot with PCRs, with the masks, tests, etc. So they are ready. They know it's going to be a second wave. But the second time is we wait to open here until we are sure if the second wave comes, this time we'll be completely ready.
Yeah.
Which is like in other towns, in other parts of Europe, that it's not happening. They are reopening, like it happened in France. Hey, let's go back to school, and in a week, okay, let's close the schools because we opened too soon. So things like that. Here we are, like, let's not open that soon, especially the big areas, because if we do, we'll be in trouble in a week. And we have enough trouble to Spain, already.
David, I was wondering, because you do a lot of Comicons. You work with the artists at Comicons, and there were a couple canceled. There was one where we would see each other that was canceled, and unfortunately. But Do you have any idea how long that situation is going to stay? Do you talk with the people behind the scenes?
Yeah, no, I have to, because every single cancellation is literally killing my income, and
Yeah.
I've had 5 already this year.
Wow.
I have Bilbao, I have Dutch Comicon Spring, I had Gothenburg, I had what else? I had Stockholm, etc. So it has been difficult. But
Wow.
what's
And
going
are they
on?
all cancelled, or are they postponed to another date?
Stockholm is cancelled until next year. Bilbao is cancelled until next year. Dutch Comic Con Spring is cancelled, so they're going to do, hopefully, the fall or winter edition, as you want to call it. They call it winter edition, but it's in November, so I have difficulties calling it. I would say the fall or autumn edition because it's fucking November. But anyway, they call it winter. And I think they are going to try to do Gothenburg also. Move it. It was April, move it to October, November, or something like that.
Yeah,
So what's
okay.
happening there, Amy, is that they're trying to delay.
Yeah.
In the cases they can, as much as possible. In Dutch, is just canceling one, hoping for the other. It all depends on how things are going in the Netherlands. In that case, for example, I have high hopes in Madrid. Madrid is December. I have high hopes that's going to happen because things are looking good. But also, convention centers are really expensive, and if you can open for like 30%. If I am the company, I would say I am not doing it because I'm going to lose a lot of money. Except if convention centers get wise about it and they say what they should, which is you can only have 30%, so I'm going to, tell you to pay 30%. But they don't, as you know, they normally don't do that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I for the ones in end of fall, beginning of winter, I still have hopes. For anything else, of course, San Diego Comic Con was canceled, but New York Comic Con or any others in Europe, Paris Comic Con, and all those, I don't see how they can happen. Especially seeing how Paris is not that under control, or Barcelona was canceled in May, same reason, but they have the big manga Comic Con, which is like the biggest in Europe, by the end of October, and I don't know if that's going to happen because that has 250,000 people every year.
Yeah, it's the same with the German book fair, the biggest book fair in the world, I think, in Frankfurt. And they're thinking of opening it. It's in October, but it will be a lot different than we knew it. I cannot imagine everybody running around for hours in those festival halls with face masks. It will be very strange.
Yes.
And Frankfurt Book Fair it's so crowded, and you cannot even think about social distancing.
Imagine something like Lucca or like Angoulême, which mostly take place on the streets. To say in a way, can you think about being there?
Oh, it's so difficult because I always, when I go to a festival or to a Comic-Con, I always come home sick. I always have the con flu. I just have a runny nose. I have to stay in bed for a week. Always. I always plan 1 week after the Comic-Con just to get better. So I'm I'm not going to go to any festival as long as it's not safe, because I just know that, at least for me, it's not going to be safe enough if there's no vaccine or if the virus is not completely gone. And I think that the festivals that are partly outside are much easier to organize than the ones that are inside these halls or tents, because I just can't imagine all those people standing in line, keeping distance. That's just too difficult to organize. Outside, I have good hopes for the festivals outside, like Lucca.
I can see that in Angoulême. I cannot see that in Lucca. No, because you've been in Lucca, right?
Yeah, I have.
You cannot move.
Oh, that's right. It's
just everybody's like this at all times, and that's how Italians are. It's not a criticism. It's just how they are. It's like us multiplied by 10.
That's true.
It's not a criticism. We are Latins. We're close. We like to hug people, but they are like this all the time. So considering that Luca scares the shit out of me, because I don't see how the way they are, they can keep the distances. But I hope you're right, and I hope they do it, and I hope it works.
Yeah, we Germans, we are natural social distancers, and it's the big festival in Germany, which is only every 2 years, was supposed to be last weekend, and they canceled it completely. So they're not even thinking of moving it to the next year, because next year there's another festival. So it's all every 2 years, and that is, in the last year it was outside. Last time it was outside in some tents in the city, so it was really, really beautiful. So everybody was really looking forward to the next one, and now it's cancelled, and everybody's very sad about it. And you see how much depends on such a festival. It's not just coming together and looking at the books. It's also for people to present their new stuff that they've been working on for years. And now all these things are not possible.
Yeah, it's Madrid Fair. Madrid Book Fair is the biggest one here. It's sold out on the outside. They moved it until November, I think. San Jordi, which is book day all over Spain, which is where most publishers and most creators get most of the money for the year, to be honest, was also moved from April to July, and then it's going to be really restricted. So everything is really weird. And I told everybody we should call it a skip year. I understand they can't, of course, because companies need to survive, and I don't get why they are opening all the, I think it's next week. All the frontiers in the Schengen territory are open next week.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, why? What the fuck are you doing? What the fuck? We are not ready. And I don't mean Spain. I mean as a community space in Europe, because there's been no. Spain has been really strict, but okay, this other country has been, this other hasn't. So by the end of the day, you have like 15, 20, 22 nations, whatever, that each one has done whatever this finger was telling them to do. So now it's like, okay, you're going to get tourists from everywhere. Are they getting tests on the airport? No. Or when they get here, they get the temperature, their names, etc., to get under control. But if they're asymptomatic, they can get the contagion to 5 people in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So of course we know there's a second wave coming. If you open frontiers, you can't stop it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, let's see what happens. It's very strange how the curves are behaving at some point. Everybody's looking at the numbers and the curves, and in Berlin we had quite strange situations in the last weeks, because there were a lot of manifestations, demonstrations on the street, and I don't know if you saw the pictures of the Black Lives Matter demonstration. It was crazy. I was there, and I was standing aside because I realized, okay, if you go in the middle of the demonstration, it's too close. And things like that were happening in the weeks before as well. Although there was the rule of the demonstration has to be limited, and so everybody's really scared about the numbers going up, because more and more the people are not following the rules anymore. And so far everything looks okay, but you don't know what will happen in the next time. That's what I find so scary about this virus, is that it doesn't seem predictable. Although everybody's trying to predict things, but then the numbers do a completely opposite thing.
I don't think it's not predictable. I just think we weren't ready. Because there was no money in any country. And recommendations were really clear. When the idiots say, "Oh, Bill Gates, they blah 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 blah," all the ultra-right stupids, you're like, no, Bill Gates said exactly the opposite, you idiots. He said, prepare, because a pandemic is coming, and you're not preparing, and you're going to pay for it. And he was right.
Yes.
Because and a lot of other epidemiologists said the same thing. Pandemics come every few years. There's
Yeah,
going to be one that is going to catch you by surprise, and you're not going to be able to stop it. So all governments were like, nah, don't worry, nothing. Nah. They've been saying that for years with, the first SARS, the avian flu.
Yeah, everybody said that it's happening in Asia. So yeah, it's starting in Asia. It will stay in Asia. So let's continue doing our thing.
Yeah,
But
because
then
nobody takes a plane from China to anywhere else.
No.
There was people saying, nah, it's only in Italy. There's no worries. And I was like, it takes a plane.
Yeah.
And of course, it was
one plane.
no, and that's what happened. One plane from Italy to Barcelona, another plane from Italy to Madrid. Boom.
Yeah.
Huge spread. That's it.
The thing happened in New Zealand just today,
Exactly.
I think. Yeah, they said that the country is free of the virus, and boom, 2 ladies were released too early on the quarantine, and now they have it again. And
As I said, I don't think it's not that that is the virus itself. It's a coronavirus. They know how it works. They know that it's, at least for now, it doesn't mutate as much as other viruses, similar to the flu in that way. But there's no preparation. There's no vaccine. There was no, countries weren't ready in terms of the PCRs, the tests, protections for health workers, etc. There was no preparation because nobody was listening to the ones who knew. And the ones who knew was saying, get ready. It's like, nah, that doesn't matter. Boom.
do you think that this actually what's happening is like the perfect script for a story for a graphic novel or whatever? Does that that's mostly a question to Aimee. Does it inspire you? It's somehow to think of something dealing with the coronavirus situation at the moment?
Well, it doesn't really inspire me. It just worries me because I'm thinking of all the stories that I still want to make, and they all take place in the world before Corona. So, there's, in the scenarios that I'm working on, there's people, just visiting each other and shaking hands and stuff. And I'm like, well, by the time the book comes out, is that allowed? Or should I just erase all that and change things in my books or not? It's just, I think maybe in 10 years it's easier to make a comic than right now in this transition phase between the normal world or the new normal or whatever. And as for inspiration, I wouldn't say it inspires me because I've seen a lot of comics being made right now about the virus, and
really?
at a certain point I just had enough of them. I thought, okay, I'm seeing this on the news every day. I don't have to also read about it in comics and movies, and I like to escape in books, and so I think if anything I would not make a comic book about it.
I've seen the thing with the Soderbergh movie, Contagion.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It went straight to 2.
No.
The charts.
It started when the pandemic started. It was listed on Netflix and the others as science fiction. 2 weeks later, they changed it for drama.
That's good.
I'm not kidding. It's not a joke. They changed it automatically. And then, like, in 2 weeks after they started, Paloma was watching it, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And now I'm watching. It's like, "Don't you have enough?"
Yes.
And she was like, "No, it's fascinating. I'm watching it because it's fascinating
It's really fascinating. It's
how
so
well
close.
he showed it coming." I don't know how Soderbergh could show it coming. And I was like literally saying, because I could bet my ass that he spent a lot of time talking to epidemiologists about it, to the people who knows, because that's too close to reality. That's how it could happen if you listen to them. And then you watch the movie, and what we are going on now, we're going through, it's like, it's too close. There's gotta be, the guy is not only a really good director, he's a guy who knew how to get that information and make it into almost a documentary, I would say, if you watch the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really frightening how close it is to what's happening.
Because talking to Chaikin is stood, Howard Chaikin is stood for the rest of all these chats. is the definition of the most boring apocalypse in the history of the world. Because you expect red clouds, blood coming from, blood, raining blood, zombies on the street. You look out the window and you see somebody with a knife, Freddy Krueger or something like that. And then it's it's just, hey, don't go out. Why? Because if you go out, you die.
Yeah, and we don't have toilet paper. Well, that's the apocalypse.
So is it a boring apocalypse? Do you agree or not?
No. Actually, when I go out and look at things, look how people behave, and see the whole setup of the pandemic, then there's so many options for a really, really good story. But you have to grab it and write it down, and you can make conspiracy theories about it. Well, that's a huge thing in Germany, actually. But I have the feeling it's for me it's too close. It's just I also need the distance to it, and I also talk to friends who are authors, and I said, well, you have time at the moment. Sit down, write the coronavirus novel, and it will be a huge seller, and you're going to be rich in 1 year. And the people said, no, I cannot do it. It's just when I sit down and I try to focus on it, it's empty. There's nothing coming out. It's I see the news, and there's the script, actually. It's and there's so many things happening, and people's fates and what they have to go through. The stories are lying around, and it's too obvious to get them. And I have to say, well, I included one picture of the pandemic in my next book, because in the beginning I make a portrait of the David Bowie song 5 Years, where he's actually talking about the apocalypse. And so I included a picture of people standing in the subway with face masks on. So I think when people see that in 1 year, they will actually they know what I mean by that. Well, this will become like a symbol of the year 2020.
Absolutely. Oh, let me say hello to the people on the channel. Aileen, excited. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Ángel Pérez, buenas tardes, let's go. Carla DeJongh, hi, Amy. Paula Ventimiglia, hello. Aileen says, hi, Carla, this is Marisa, just so you know. Joseph Blanc, hi, Amy. Carla DeJongh, hi again. All the family here. Just so you know.
No, but it's interesting what you're saying, Reinhard, because I don't know about you, but as an author, I always I look for interesting stories, and maybe not like actively that I dig up old newspapers or something, but if something comes by in, I don't know, on television, or somebody tells me something that's interesting for a script, I always write it down and maybe use it later, so I have this archive of interesting stories that someday I could use for a comic book. But like you're saying, right now we are in the most interesting story in decades, in centuries maybe, and now nothing comes out. Now it's just too big. You can't use it. And also you don't know how it's going to end. So even if you start writing right now, you probably have to start over in 2 weeks. It's old news. And
that's like you have Akira. I see Akira in your.
Yeah, that's.
I remember when they did the movie. He didn't know the ending.
Oh, really? When they did
the movie was finished before he finished the book.
Really? Okay.
So that's why it's different. He didn't know how to end it. That's what happened. So you know what you do what we call in Spain the Almodóvar method. Pedro Almodóvar always says that he goes through tabloids and reads the most heinous stories, the more craziest stories on the tabloids, just to get ideas and put them on notebooks for his next movies.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm not the only one.
No, I can. No, you're not.
Yeah, that would be actually a pretty good idea to write the story and then have several endings that you can adapt to what's happening in real time. Then, I mean, we all hope that it's going to have a happy ending, but well, history has taught us that in most cases it's not.
Yeah, you have to choose your own adventure.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you pick for endings. Wait, do we all die? Do we get a vaccine? You know, is Trump re-elected and we all go to hell? So, going about what you just said, I mean, you make notes about future stories. But my question here is, why comics? Why comics? Why you? And this is also for you to later to write her. Why did you go for comics as your expression, as an artist, as a creator, and not illustration, novels, theater, anything else? Why is your guts told you I gotta go in this direction?
Good question. I think for me that was that was pretty clear very early on. So I was a big comic book reader as a child, and my parents had a lot of comics. They were collectors. So I have to blame them for my job right now. So we had a lot of comics at home, and I was really this quiet child that was just drawing and reading. And I read a lot of comics, and I just loved them. And I remember first I wanted to become a writer, so I wanted to work on children's books, for example, or maybe fiction, something like that. But it turned out that I was pretty good at drawing. So I was, in my class at school, I was always the best at drawing, and people were telling me how good I was at drawing. So I thought, oh, maybe this is a better choice of career than writing. And so maybe I did that because of the social pressure. I'm not sure, but I started drawing and writing, and then of course the form, the medium that first comes up is comics. And I remember doing my own comics of Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, when I was a kid, and I enjoyed, drawing the characters. And at some point, I switched to original characters. And I think I was like 10 years old, maybe, when I made my first original characters. Yeah, so, and then I couldn't stop, and I never stopped. But for me, it was a very natural thing. So already when I was 10 years old, I kind of knew that was the direction that I was going. And there's not really much else that I'm good at. So that's why I'm still doing it. I tried a lot of things, but this is the only thing I can do.
Reinhard?
For me, it was kind of the same thing. But I started drawing comic books in school during the lessons, and it secured my social status in the class because I was not really good in sports, and like the typical introvert artist boy, but every time my approach to comic books was very much related to movies, and I was always thinking in the terms of movies. Like one of the comic projects that I did with friends was like a comic version of Super 8 movies that one of my friends had. He had Alien, and I was watching Alien when I was like 12 years old. It gave me nightmares. We watched it on Super 8, so it was cut down to 20 minutes. The whole movie. And then we made comic book versions out of that. And so every time comic book was for me always related to movies. And actually I wanted to become a movie director when I was young, but I'm really not a team person. So comics is for me the perfect compromise of making something like a movie, and actually being, when you do a comic book, you're like a whole movie team in one person. And you can do the same thing like you do in a movie, but just you have complete control on everything. And later on, when I studied, I came back, well, at first then I had my little experiences in serious art. And then when I was studying, I came back to comic books because I discovered the books of people like Dave McKean or Kent Williams or Bill Sienkiewicz. And I was completely thrilled by their way of storytelling because they did it very experimental. They used a lot of different techniques, and it also was very, very visual and very much related to movies. And so that was my way to enter the comic scene. Later on, I went into a completely different direction because I realized I want to do storytelling in a different way. I want to the artwork became too important, and I wanted to focus more on the story itself. So I lowered the energy I was giving on a complicated and amazing artwork, more to telling the story, creating characters and situations.
Did you ever think about becoming a photographer? Because in a way, I've always thought, and I'm probably wrong because I always am, that if you haven't been a comic book creator, you get having a photographer because you capture moments so well.
I do a lot of photography, but yeah, not professional. But this is something that I want to capture in drawings. Is always something. It is very real. I'm not very abstract in my drawings. It always looks kind of real, and I want to make the drawings so real that the reader during the process of reading is going inside the story and forgets that he's reading a comic book. That's my main attempt, my main goal when I do storytelling. And so using drawings that maybe sometimes have an appeal of photography is some way to build up a new kind of reality.
No, I didn't mean that. I wasn't talking about how you draw. I meant that if you haven't been I always thought that if you hadn't been a comic book artist, you could have been a photographer because of how well you portray real life moments in your pages. It was the opposite of what you say. You mentioned movies, and I was thinking all the time. I always thought you could have been a photographer if you had been a comic book artist. That's what I was asking. If that ever crossed your mind or not.
All the photographers that I know, they are very good psychologists as well, because they really can manipulate people to do something in front of the camera or give them a good feeling, and I'm really not that kind of person. maybe it's something that you learn, but even though I'm photographing a lot, I'm so shy with my camera. I barely can ask people, can I take a photo of you? It's so I better do drawings then. Then I don't have to ask anybody.
Question for both of you. When you start a project, for example, you do biography a lot, Reinhard. And I mean, in a way, we could say you do what Americans call a slice of life. Okay? When you're going to start a project, do you have a certain subject in mind about what you like to do? Or it's just whatever, touches you and you say, I need to tell this story?
For me, it's usually it starts with a subject, and then I'm very convinced that that's the thing I want to express. I start drawing, I start writing, and the subject completely fades away and turns into something else, which is happening right now. So I'm working on a new graphic novel about the 30s, which is really interesting because it's during the Great Depression in the United States. So here we are also in a crisis. Well, that was also a crisis with a lot of problems and people losing their jobs and hunger and everything. And it's so interesting. I was doing a lot of research because I want to get this right. And with every book I was reading, with every documentary I was watching, I saw like 20 other topics that I wanted to make a book about. So I stopped doing research. I stopped doing the research, I started writing, and then I just decided to stick with the scenario and only look up the things that I need for the scenario. So if I need to know the type of car that they're driving in, I just Google what cars were there in 1935. But I don't read a book about the car industry in the 30s. It's impossible, and I'm sure Reinhard will recognize
that. Are you sure you don't read the book about all the cars?
Well, I can go deep, with research. But I was wondering. I'm sorry if I'm hijacking this question, David, but Reinhard is also working a lot with biographies and people who actually existed or still exist, like Nick Cave. And I'm very curious of how you decide how much research you do and when you just leave it, when you just say, okay, from this point on, it's just me drawing an interpretation.
Reinhard, he's asking for a friend. It's not because he doesn't do research.
I'm struggling with this.
Books like this one, like this big, about car industries and gears. Like, please go ahead, friend.
Well, I think it really depends on the subject. When I did the book about Fidel Castro, I was reading so many books about the revolution. It was crazy. I was totally in that world, and I think I needed that, because if you do a mistake in a book about Fidel Castro, then everybody is like, oh no, he made a mistake here, so this is really, really bad, so it's a bad book. But if you do a book about a musician, for example, then if you do a mistake, I mean, come on, it's rock and roll. Nobody cares about what actually happened. And
maybe Nick Cave does.
like Nick Cave. I did some really took some really big freedoms in telling that. He was also mentioning that on his. He wrote a little text for the cover of the book, and he mentioned it's like a complete setup of half truth and and obvious lies or something like that. And then he said, but it's closer to the truth than any biography about me. And
that's nice.
Yeah, and that's something. Yeah, what I meant when you're talking about rock and roll, it's not about telling the facts, the exact numbers, the exact what kind of shoes he was wearing during the concert. It's more about telling something about the music, the connection between art and life and stuff like that. I mean, there have to be some points where you have to be precise, but in the details you can have freedom. You can take your freedom, but you cannot really do that when you talk about a politician. That's something completely different. And so, so at some point I realized I have to read some books about somebody. I try to get as much as possible. For example, when I made the book about the gay boxer, Emil Griffiths, there's only one book available at the time when I started working. Now there's 2 books, and that was my only source that I had. So I took this book and I took some articles, interviews, and I thought it's enough. Then the rest I can fill up with my own story and my own ideas. And I think I am close to some kind of truth. You never know what really happened. Nobody will ever know. But every time it's some kind of interpretation that you do when you do a graphic novel about somebody. And that's the fascination about it. People don't want to really read the exact depiction of the truth. They always want to have some kind of artistic interpretation in it. So yeah.
My question was why biographies? Yes.
You're asking as me. Actually, I don't know. It's I find so many interesting stories all the time, and interesting subjects. So I have no really the drive to think about my own story. There are some stories in my head where I think, okay, I could do a comic book about that, and then I found, for example, the story about Emil Griffiths, and I say, oh my God, this is the best story I've ever read. Nobody can really. If some scriptwriter would write it in Hollywood, the producer would say, okay, stop it. Nobody believes you. This is so crazy. Go home, start something new. And so I have the feeling that it's, at some point, yeah, life is larger than any idea that you can make up in your head. And then on the other side, there's other projects, like when I do books about famous musicians like David Bowie or Nick Cave. It's well, I'm a fanboy, and I want to do something with these characters, with their music, with their art, and tell something, but also tell my own thing with it. Actually, the Nick Cave book is more about myself than it is about Nick Cave.
In Spanish, we say la realidad siempre supera la ficción, which is reality is always bigger than fiction.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
You were talking about before about movies. You wanted to be a movie director. So for both of you, what movies do you think have influenced your work, if any?
Well, that's an interesting question, because here is the picture of Akira, and I would say that is the movie that influenced me the most. And that's something I've been thinking about, because I think I was 15 years old when I saw that. And I you know, with music, people say that the music that you love the most is the music that you discover when you're 16, 17, 18. So even decades later, if people ask you what is the best music or the best band, you will always go back to those bands. And I feel like, because I saw Akira when I was that age, and many other anime, you know, Totoro and that kind of stuff, I feel like those are still my favorites, but I'm not sure if they would have been if I saw them now, for example, because I love Akira still, but I also see the flaws. You know, I also see where it doesn't really. It's a masterpiece, of course, but not everything in it is good. But it definitely influenced me in a lot of ways. But I tend to think it's because I saw it at that age. Anyway, it's not important, but I would say that's a movie that influenced my career the most.
And movie directors in general, do you have any movie directors that is like, oh no, new movie by that guy, I need to watch that?
For me, no, not really, because it's funny, I'm not really a movie person. Actually, there was a time in my life, I think there was a gap of 10 years or something where I just didn't watch any movies. And this was between my 18th and 28th year or something. So just recently, I'm watching movies again, and sometimes I enjoy them. Most of the time, I don't really enjoy them. I don't know. I'm difficult with that.
No, not difficult at all. But you prefer to do you prefer to read novels?
No, I don't.
Give me something. Give me something.
What are you doing?
Just give me a comic book, I guess. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's for me, it's always very difficult to. I know, David, for example, that you go to a movie and you have a very strong opinion about it. Either it's really good or really bad or something. Like, you're very passionate. Yeah, you're very passionate about movies and pop culture. And I kind of miss that gene, I guess. And I'm usually not very. I don't have strong emotions about movies or books that I've read.
In my case, strong emotions about art in general.
Okay.
Now I have a really. It's not about me, but very quickly, I always have loved to have a strong reaction to art, and not let my brain control it. The second, third time I watch a movie, it's impossible to watch it with me, literally, because I'm gonna stop the movie like 50 times. and go back, analyze every single frame. That's why many times we go to the movie separated, Paloma and myself. Just because sometimes we don't like the same movie, so you just go to the theater. One goes to one other one to the other, and we don't have any problems with that.
Wow.
So
You're like the opposite of me, really.
it's really funny because in another way, he goes to the movie and I go to the other, and then we go out and recommend the movie to the other, so the other one ends up going to the movie that she what I watch. So it's really crazy. But the first time I always try to get crushed by the art, react to it emotionally, and then the second time I know I will have time to analyze it the second, third time, and I love how obsessive I am with the second and third view, etc., etc. And I can be in front of a painting for 3 hours and not moving, just analyzing every crazy thing. And then it's like, well, you're supposed to be emotional about art, and you're doing exactly the opposite. Yeah, because I'm fucking nuts. But that's how it works. But in your case, Reinhard?
I do the same. I mean, not so exaggerating, but every time I watch a movie, I'm analyzing it at the same time and try to get things out that I might be able to use in my work, or see like, oh man, the camera goes there, and then things like this, editing or stuff like that. It's something. Second half of my brain is analyzing the movie, and the other one is enjoying it. I don't know, and and so, like I said, I was influenced a lot by films in my work as a comic book artist, and I'm still influenced by films that have a strong visual impact on me, like. Once Upon a Time in America, for example, is one of those movies that had a huge impact on me, and I was always thrilled by how he was directing and how he was building up these really strong characters and also directors like Kubrick or Ridley Scott, for example, that had a very, very strong visual language. And like I said, I'm trying to build my comic books up like movies. The strongest, let's say the best criticism that people gave me was like, I was reading your books and I forgot about everything. 1 hour later, I closed the book and I was like, oops, where am I? That's the best thing that I can actually achieve with my books, I think.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Let me see. There's a couple questions here. Yes. Josep Blas, question for Reinhard. Will Havana come out in either English or Spanish?
I just want to know this. Good question, Josep.
The Havana book. I don't know. I don't think so. You should ask to my English publisher and not to me. We have several translations of the book in Turkish, in Greece, in Greek, pardon me, and some crazy languages, South Korean, but not in English.
He was asking English or Spanish.
Spanish, I don't think so. No,
I don't think. It is weird because ECC Paloma's company is actually doing all your books now. So it's
maybe in some years. Yeah, if the other ones are successful, then they will do this one too.
Let me call my wife.
It's family business.
And another no, she's marketing, so she's not. That's not her decisions. But anyway, she will know. Another question by Aileen for Reinhard. How long did it take you to make the Nick Cave book?
Too long. It was the creation of the book was a huge disaster because I had long time of writing the script, and I had so many huge ideas that I want to put in the script, and then those ideas were piling up in front of me, and I had no idea how to get the whole thing together. And then I had a horrible breakup, so my mind was occupied with other things, and so it took me a really, really long time to finally get all these loose endings together. And in the meantime, I was doing a lot of illustrations and sketches. So in the end, there were 2 books coming out. There's the art book and then the graphic novel, which has like 300 pages or something. So in total, I would say it took me 2.5 years to do the whole Nick Cave episode of my life.
To get it over with.
Yeah, to get it over with. Yeah, he actually helped me with my broken heart, but he was also like a menace, the nemesis sitting on my shoulder, watching what I'm doing and telling me not to fail. It was challenging, but it was also frightening at some point. But
was the book telling you where to go?
Pardon me?
Was the book telling you where to go?
Where to go?
And telling you, no, don't go, the character, Nick in this case, or whatever, yourself, because it was yourself also in that book. Was it telling you you are not going in the right direction? Was it fighting you?
Yes, yes. He was in the very beginning. We had contact, Nick Cave and me, and he was giving some little ideas. And so in the beginning, I was writing ideas for scripts, and I translated them into English and sent it to them. And he did really say it, but I think he didn't like them very much because his response were kind but uninterested. And then I realized, okay, I have to go in a completely different direction, and then that's where the whole mess started. And but in the end, there was a good approach. So because the book is telling something completely different than just a biography, it's a different approach to an artist. And for a very long time, I have to say that I really had the feeling, okay, you're gonna mess this up. You ruin your life. You have to bury the whole project. Nick will be disappointed, your publisher, and you can go and wash dishes. And it was a really hard struggle to finally come to the point. Okay, I can do it. I can do it. There's the solution. There's the light. I just have to follow the light. And then my editor came and said, "You follow the wrong light."
No.
Aimee, do your characters fight you?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
That's
They give
what
me
they
a hard
do.
time. Yeah, it's mostly because I don't do very extensive character sheets or model sheets, you know? And that's my mistake, because I know I should be doing that, but I'm just too lazy or too stubborn or something. But I'm like, I can do this. I can draw a character on page 1 and it will look the same on page 202, but it doesn't. So they give me a hard time, not maybe in the story or during the making of the book, but usually when I'm reading the whole book for the first time. It's so painful. It's so painful. And I've talked to other authors who go through the same thing. And usually when the book is published, and this is something that happens to a lot of authors, they don't want to read it for a year because they're just too scared of, seeing all these mistakes. The same goes for me, because I couldn't read my own books, especially in the beginning, for years, because it's just I can only see the things that are not good and the mistakes and the things that I struggle with that didn't work out, and all the other things I just I filter them out. I don't see them.
But that's what makes you guys better. Because you see the mistakes and you keep thinking about how to improve. That's the torture of the artist in a way.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't make life easier.
No.
But it helps you improve. And I have the feeling that my books get better and my drawings get better. But that's based on a harsh struggle and fight with yourself. And like when you get the copy of the freshly printed book from your publisher and you open it and you're like, oh my God. And you throw it in the corner and you're like, oh, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And
And
it happens to me the same.
I remember reading reviews of my books that were very positive, and I would just not believe them. I would just think somebody paid them, you know. I don't believe. Or
Calling the publisher said,
I
hey,
read a different book.
how much? How many euros? How much? No, I didn't pay anything. I cannot believe you.
This is how bad it goes, you know. This is how the struggle is real. You just, even if people give you compliments, you just think you're just saying this because I'm standing next to you, or because you know I'm going to read it, or you just don't believe anything. But after a couple of years, you do. But trust me, the first weeks, first months, it's no, it's imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
The first bad review that I got, I was really happy about it. Because I was reading it and I had the feeling, oh, finally somebody is really writing something about the book. He was reading it, he didn't like it, and he's writing it, and he's not writing something like, oh yeah, it's kind of nice, and I have to like it because it's a comic book and those poor comic artists, they don't get much money, so I write something nice about it, so at least somebody will buy it. And I was actually happy when I read this critique that was ripping my book apart, because I said, okay, now you have really reached the point where people are seriously talking about your work.
And they say I'm crazy. Okay. Now, music is an integral part of your work, Reinhard, as we know. You know.
Yes.
Because not only because you do biographies of artists, but what about you, Aimee? What about you and music? Do you have a? Let me say it this way: do you have a soundtrack?
Oh,
You have music in the background. Do you need complete silence where you work? What do you do? Don't leave us, Reinhard. Don't leave us.
I know this
problems.
No, I do listen to music. I listen to a lot of different things. I listen to things like classical music and jazz, but also country music. I listen to all the music that Reinhard made books about. So, you know, very, very different kinds of music. I listen to podcasts. And I haven't really made a comic book about musicians, but I'm actually planning on making one, which will not really be a biography, but it will be more about the fandom side of music. So it will be about a person who becomes obsessed with a musician who is still alive. But I don't think I should say who it is, because that would give it away. I can say it's a woman and that she's British. I think that's all I'm saying.
That's too much already.
Maybe.
You said you said the name, right, Reinhard?
I said a name.
You said a name, and I heard the name, and I think it's the same one, but I'm not going to say it. I am going to act as I didn't hear that name. But it depends. Second question is, depends on the phase of the work. I mean, if you are doing layouts or scripting, no sound, and then when you're finishing, sounds, and do you adapt the music you hear to this kind of a scene? As I was saying, some artists have told me, if I need to do something epic, I need, Lord of the Rings, Last of the Mohicans, Star Wars. If I want to do something intimate, emotional, I go with, romantic classic music, French romantic music, etc., etc. So they adapt the music they listen to the kind of things they want to tell, because they think they enhance, they make their brain connect more to what they tell, and it ends up making the work better, in a way. What do you think?
Oh, that's interesting. No, so I don't work that way, but I think it could work, definitely. I think that's a very interesting way to motivate your brain into, getting the atmosphere that you're looking for. But for me, no, I like you said in the beginning, I don't listen to music when I'm writing or when I'm storyboarding, because it's just too much. And also, I find sometimes it's better to listen to instrumental music, so with no voices and no singing. So there's a lot of genres that have like post-rock. I like to listen to shoegaze music. And what I like about the shoegaze genre is that it has singing, but it's very difficult to hear any word. It's more like very noisy. So it's almost like there's no voice at all. So that's the kind of music I listen to. When there's too much like singing, too much articulation, I tend to listen to the text too much and get distracted. So I would say I listen to instrumental music most of the time.
Yeah, I was watching the other day. They have on Disney Plus, The Mandalorian, and they have, the bonus tracks, which is like the DVD bonuses. And the other day they were talking about, they released the episode about the soundtrack, and there was a scene where they were showing Ludwig Göransson and shit, what's the name of the actor? Who's also a singer?
I don't know.
I just blanked. Did you watch the movie Solo?
No.
The actor who played Lando Calrissian in Solo. Fuck, I'm gonna find it. Anyway, they were showing that they were the Ludwig Göransson, which is the composer on The Mandalorian, was composing with him, and it was literally what you say. It was music and the singer not singing, just making sounds. And I have never seen that, and it was really fascinating.
Interesting.
You okay, Reinhard?
Yes. I just got water in the wrong.
So
You know what I mean.
Okay, so same question for you. Do you work background music, not background music, complete silence? Depends on the phase of the work.
Yeah, it depends on the phase. I when I'm writing, then I cannot listen to anything. And when I do sketching and layout and all those things, when I have to concentrate on something, then I can listen to music in the background. And when I do like the inking, when it's just basically working something by hand. You don't have to really think about ideas or something. Then I listen to podcasts or audiobooks a lot, and that's actually a part of the work that I really like. That you can just you sit there for hours in your studio. You do the inking, and then you listen to books, and you get carried away, and then at some point you think, okay, now it's time to go, but I really want to finish the story. So you take another 2 hours in the studio because you want to finish the audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the work that I like the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I was for the Nick Cave book, I was listening to Dostoevsky, and I had so much time to listen to audiobooks there. So it's like a whole library, and that's a lot of fun to do it. But I cannot really say that music influences my style of drawing when I listen. I can listen to metal and classical music, but it doesn't really influence the style that I'm drawing there. It always depends on what I want to hear, what I like to hear.
Yeah, but I wasn't even talking about the style. I was talking more about, as Aimee said, motivate that part of the brain to get yourself more into this scene. Getting more emotionally involved, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. No, I cannot really say that. No.
Mm-hmm. By the way, the actor is Donald Glover.
Oh, Donald Glover. Okay.
And I meant his alter ego as a singer, as Childish Gambino.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
So but anyway, I have a question for you, Aimee, for Josep Blas. For Aimee, just wanted to say that I love Blossoms in Autumn. To me, is the closer any illustrator has gotten to the way Will Eisner told the stories.
Really?
Wow.
Oh.
I'm a big Will Eisner fan.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joseph. That's really sweet. I'm a big fan of Will Eisner, actually, so that's great.
Yeah, I ask. See, that takes me to that question. We talk about influences in movies, talking about music, blah blah blah. What about comics? Who is the guy? Well, who's the guy? Guys that you loved reading before, and that I hate the word influence, but you know what I mean. You know that it stays with you until today. When you tell a story, I always tell artists, to look at Bollywood. The famous 22 panels that always work. It's like, watch this and then we talk. But in terms of storytelling, in terms of narration, in terms of even point of view, somebody who's always stayed with you as an influence or whatever you want to call it.
For me, when I started reading a lot of comics, I think I was 10 years old or 9 years old, and I read a lot of the French and Belgium comics like Spirou, and they influenced the very beginning of my drawings. But when I became older, I discovered manga, and that became the biggest influence for sure. So I would say Osamu Tezuka, for example. I mean, I still love that guy, and his work just gets better somehow. I don't know, the works don't change, but it gets better. And Junji Ito, who makes the brilliant horror manga, he still does it. It's amazing. And I still, when I go to a comic book shop, I still catch myself buying a lot of manga and not buying a lot of graphic novels, even though that's my area in comics. I still buy a lot of new manga just because I'm so in love with that style and the storytelling. I love what they can do with black and white, just the simple lines and patterns. They can just create this huge atmosphere. So I would say manga is a big influence, but also, I don't know, just very recently I've discovered some young authors' work, like Tilly Walden, for example, who is amazing. Bastien Vives, who is a French author,
Yes,
also very young and very talented. I don't know, there's so much good stuff right now. I don't know where to start.
I have four gods in Japanese comics. I always say it's Junji Ito, of course Tezuka, Naoki Urasawa,
Oh, yeah.
and Jiro Taniguchi. Otomo is a separate thing. He's just
He's
there, But it's horror, slice of life, thriller, and and the god of manga. He could tell any story and he could make it brilliant. But in the other sense, I agree with you, and I think you, Reinhard, are going to agree too. We are really in a golden age of comics. The average quality, I don't think has never been even close. You have gods, of course. You have Mobius in an era. You have Uderzo. You have Kirby. You can go any kind of comic. The Hernandez brothers, of course, and blah blah blah. But never this level where you can look everywhere and you're going to see brilliant creations in Europe, in America, in Japan, in Korea, and in many other places. What say you, Mr. Reinhard?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I started working in the comic book industry in the middle of the 90s. And if you wanted to do something serious for adults, then you really had no chance in Germany. It was so difficult because there was nothing. The comic book industry was mostly related to cartoons and funnies, and then there was superhero stuff from England and the States, and that was basically it. And now the situation is completely different. We have in Germany we have a huge comic scene, and there is so many artists, fascinating artists, and they're translated into other countries. When I started, I went to festivals like Angoulême, and I was standing in front of Casterman, for example, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like the hugest thing in the world, and I will never get there. And now the situation is different. Now that's my publishing house in France, and also other German comic book artists. They're translated into different languages and publishers come to German festivals to look for new stuff. So that's totally different. So I'm really happy to be in this time at the moment, and it's very fascinating to go to comic book stores and see all the new stuff that's coming out. And you cannot buy that all. And yet it's also this challenging thing that you're not the only one. You look at things and you go like, oh my God, this is so good. I have to put more effort into my drawings, and this is encouraging, and makes you move forward. Like it's that's also the punishment of the artist. It's not looking at your own drawings and thinking you have to approve. It's also looking at other people's work and saying, oh my God, I want to be like him or like her, or depending. So
yeah, I recognize that. You know, when I go to Angoulême, and I go every year, I always come home with bags full of comics, and maybe the first couple of weeks they're very demotivating because I read them and they're so good, they're so much better than me, and those guys who make the comics are probably 20 years old or 18 or way too young.
yeah, but they have your books in their bag.
Yeah, but then after a while you feel inspired. You're like, wow, this is something I can learn from, and I want to try more work with these brushes or with these layouts or something like that, and it's very inspiring. So I'm always happy to go to a festival like that, because I feel like every time I come back home and I've learned something new, and I have new insights about my own drawing.
And what about the technique? You guys, Aimee, you work digital?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And do you, when you talk to other colleagues, are you always asking, where did you get that brush? I need it. How did you do it? I need new brushes. New tips for I don't know if you use the iPad Pro or Cintiq tablet, but new tips for the pencil. How do you do it? It's like all the time, I need to learn that brush. Give me.
Well, I do talk with colleagues about inking and about what programs they use, but it's not a very interesting conversation usually, because everybody works in the same programs. There's Photoshop, there's Manga Studio, there's Procreate, and that's it. And it really depends on, it doesn't depend on the software or the hardware that you use, but it depends on your own creativity.
Absolutely, but it'll always be too artists who work with the iPad Pro. The others, they're always telling me, they're asking others for, how did you get that brush? And how to keep trying and trying and trying new brushes. Even if the one they have works, when they see another one, it's like, I need to use that one. They need to see how it works. Keep trying and trying new one, which is like an obsession. That's why I was asking if you are on the same boat.
I don't think so. I do see with my colleagues, sometimes I see a very interesting effect, and I do send them a little message like, how did you do that? Hoping that they will share it with me, and sometimes they do. Sometimes they even send me the brush that they used, because I think in the comic book industry, among creators, everyone is really supportive of each other. So if anyone would send me an email with what kind of brush did you use, I would just send it right away, no problem. And I feel a lot of my colleagues are the same way. But I miss working on paper sometimes, because when I do signings at festivals, I always sign with a pen and a brush in the book, and every time I do that, I'm like, oh, this feels so good, just to actually press down on the paper and the smell of the paper, the smell of the ink. I miss that.
Yeah.
So maybe, who knows? Maybe I should go back.
Yeah, I was asking Ramon Bax like 3 weeks ago, and people was asking, why are you still on paper and this? I was like, I need the feel. I need to feel the paper. I need to feel the pressure of the pencil. I need to see the brush, making it work. It doesn't feel natural. You're saying, I try, I don't see it's bad. I'm just saying, for me, it's not natural. I don't feel it, and I need to feel my hand. I need to feel the pencil. I need to feel, the weight. Yeah, you Reinhard?
I'm a very traditional guy working with brushes and ink on paper. and I do some redoing on Photoshop, and I also have an iPad where I use Procreate for some coloring, but most of the work is done traditionally on paper, and I really love having dirty hands and this working with material. I'm staring at screens for far too often in my life, so I don't really want that in my drawing work as well. So and also you have wonderful original pages that you can sell afterwards. That's what the digital people cannot do, and it's mostly it's the feeling of the structure, the paper and all these things. I really need that somehow. That's kind of old-fashioned. And what you said about the festivals and meeting people and talking about the techniques and exchanging tips. Yeah, this is also something that I really miss.
Yes.
First of all, well, there's are no festivals, and on the other side, all my colleagues are using now the iPad, and I'm the only one that I can talk to about this new brush I bought from the store, and be amazed about the tip and everything. So please, people, talk to me about brushes, real brushes, not the Photoshop brushes.
Aimee, original art to sell. That's another reason.
It doesn't happen very often, I have to say.
Well, but considering how much that market is growing, because it's growing and the prices are going really, really high.
Really?
And it's also a part of my conversation yesterday with David Rubin and David Valdeón, about the state of comics in in their general, not the captive audience as they call them, but the general audience who until 5, 6, 7 years ago never read comics. That is being captivated all over Europe because of work like you guys or Paco Roca or even David Rubin and all these kind of people who's decided to tell personal stories. And I consider your stories personal, Reinhard, even if they're biographies. It's really easy to see your spirit is there. It's you telling the stories, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's changed the views. These creators, and I think you'll agree, keep telling me, I love to have my reader from always coming and say hello. I love to see him because I know him, as a friend for years and sign his books. But what I love is to see the new people that is coming, keeps coming every year, every show. You have new people because we are getting to a much wider audience. And that's also what's helping, getting the prices of the originals up because you're getting a lot of buyers who never bought comics before and never appreciated the art before. It was, I read comics when I was a kid. I read Spirou or Asterix or blah, 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 but never went past that. Or superheroes or never went past that. But now we're in an era, and I want to ask you guys if you agree. Sorry, I went too long with this. Are we really getting where we want to in terms of going to a wider audience and growing into culture, not in the artificial pop culture way, which is the movies, but in a real organic way where people really wants to see what we do because we are touching a part of them as readers that novels used to do, but comics never covered because they were limited to French comics, historical or science fiction, American comics, superheroes, Spanish comics until a few years ago, comics, comedians, funny books, whatever. But now you are covering a much, much, much wider spectrum. What do you think?
Yeah, I think
it's go first.
Somebody got mail. I think we're going in that direction that if you take it like stories and not graphic novels or comics, if these stories are getting an audience, and that audience is not so much into a certain field, like there are comic books in a normal bookstore, and people go there that usually would not enter a comic store, and they go to the shop and they say, okay, I want to buy the new book I read about in a newspaper. There is something out about Fidel Castro, for example, and so they buy a comic book, and that's what I find that I'm so happy about, that the stories are not so much controlled from the medium anymore, and I'm always working towards that. I always when I started my career as a comic book artist, I always wanted to get out of the very limited comic situation that we had in that time in Germany, and well, somehow worldwide. And I was always struggling. I said, yeah, but this is so good. This has to be somewhere else. Why can you not sell this in another part of the bookshop and not in the crappy corner down there where the comic books usually were? And so, well, now we have the situation, and I hope it's more opening up, and I think we're on a good way there.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think 2 years ago, a book of mine came out, Blossoms in Autumn. It also in German and Spanish, and that book was about the love between an older woman and an older man. So they were in their 60s. That was the subject of the book. And this was a subject that was not very often used for comics or movies or whatever. So it was a bit of a risk, but we thought, why not? Let's just try and see what happens. But it turned out to be a huge hit, especially in France and also in Spain. Actually, it's a big hit because people of that age, of 60 years old, and also especially women, which is really interesting, they love the story because they recognize themselves, and they feel like, oh, finally somebody is talking about the subject. Because it's fun to read about superheroes, and it's fun to read about Vikings or whatever, but when a story hits you close to home, that's something different, that's something special. And I noticed that the signing sessions that we did in France, I did it together with Sidro, who was the writer.
Mm-hmm.
And we noticed that there were so many people from that age group, so 60 and older, but also a lot of female fans that we never saw before. And he said to me, I've been working in this field for 30 years, and I've never seen an audience like this. And that was really interesting. So he also noticed that change. And I think that's a very positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anything to add, mister?
Not very much.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I thought you made a gesture that you wanted to add something to your answer.
Please, teacher. I have something.
Angel Perez asks a question for Aimee. The work in animation and in comic, do you face it with different methods, or do you think they are, as an artist for you, they are complementary?
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's what's good to explain to the other people listening and looking. I'm also working in animation, and I did a couple movies. I made a couple of short movies, and animation is very, very different approach than comics. It's, people tend to think that it's almost the same thing, but it's completely different. Mostly because in animation, you have to work with a big team, and you're only a small part of the whole production. So not do you only work with the director, but you also work with different animators, you work with different production levels. And it's, so for example, I work on an animated film, and then 2 years later, the final product is presented, and I don't really recognize my own work in it anymore because other people have been doing stuff on it for 2 years. But a comic is very different because you are in full control, especially if you write and draw. And the lines that you put on a page are exactly the lines that are being printed. So you are in full control. Of course, there are editors who give you feedback, but you don't have to be afraid that things are going to change radically after you deliver your files. So, for example, in animation, when I see there's a shot of mine used that I storyboarded, I'm always very relieved. And I feel that way because 99% of the other images are not used. And it's not a bad thing because that's part of the production. They look at my work, they think things over, they change things, and the thing gets better. So that's part of the process. And I think if there's any difference in comics and animation, is that in animation you learn to kill your darlings. You learn not to value your own work too much, because if you value your work, if you make a drawing and you're like, wow, this is the best drawing I've ever made, you can be sure it will be deleted. You will not see that back. And in comics, you can still, if you love a picture that you drew, you say, okay, I'm going to protect this picture with my life, and it will be in the book, and it will be in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easier, I guess. It's an easier process. You don't have to, I don't know, you don't have to work through too many disappointments in comics.
So in comics, everything can be precious, but in animation, nothing can be precious. Reinhard, have you done any animation or nah?
I did. One time I was kind of a art director for a movie. It was a German TV movie, and it had some animated sequences in it. And after that, I promised myself to never work in a movie again. It was actually a huge disaster because nobody really knew how to do it, but everybody had a really, really strict idea about how it should look like. And I was in the point where I could not really fight for my ideas. And in the end, it looked like a compromise, and it looked like exactly like that I didn't want it to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm not I'm not a team person. I would be the worst director in the world. So I'm not doing it. And there are other people that can do it very, very better, way better than me. And I would like to give input to movies, and but I'm not want to work as an art director or something like a leading position in a movie project anymore. It's like movies are so unpredictable because there's so many people working in it, and everybody has the idea how it should look like, and you really have to fight for your things. So I better not do it.
So let me see how much time it's been here. 96 minutes. Okay, you have a life, so I'll better let you go. Last question for where do we go from now? What is next for you? What is your plan to conquer the wall of comics?
Well, like I said, I'm working on the David Bowie thing, and that will keep me busy for the next years. With Corona or without Corona, I don't know. If this lockdown will last much longer, then I have the 2 parts. It's going to be 2 parts. I have them finished way ahead of the schedule. And besides that, I'm also working on illustrations of some novels, like Brave New World. I just finished working on Brave New World. And now I'm working on 1984.
Nice.
And that's a lot of fun to do it. It's such a fantastic book, and I hope we get the permission to do a new edition of Fahrenheit 451. And that I would be able to do it like that.
But you just mentioned 3 of my favorite books ever. So
really,
if you mention Foundation next, just throw out, jump out the window. So
I will not mention it then.
Okay.
I will give you some copies.
Okay. So go please.
Yeah, and so that are my future plans. And when the David Bowie thing is finished, I don't know. I should really think of something completely different than maybe do something without biographical approach. I don't know.
Why don't you two work together? Damn it. One works, like Dupuy and Berberian, like 400 comic book, and where you both draw at the same time and write at the same time, and then you kill each other, and I'm your witness.
That sounds tempting.
That's a plan. Okay.
That's a plan. Yes.
Aimee?
So I'm working on my next book about the Great Depression, which will be finished by the end of this year and published in April in Holland and in France, and I hope in many other languages after, but you never know. And after that, I'm working on a book about, that's also an interesting book. It's for Air Libre, which is a label of the French publisher Dupuy, which I used to read as a kid. I used to read all those books with that label because I just loved it. It's kind of the first steps into graphic novels that they did, because they used to only have Spirou and Asterix and that kind of stuff. But then they made a kind of a more serious label with comics. And that's the one that I'm working for. So I can't tell you too much about the story, but it's going to be my next book. So I'm going to be busy for a couple of years to come.
And what do you think is next for comics in general? Do you think we need something, some other change, or as we said before, we are now finally on the right path, and we just gotta let it bloom, bloom and grow, and get to the readers? Which, of course, we need the publishers and distributors to help on, but they need to make money, so I think they're gonna help whether they like it or not. But publishers and distributors aside, do you think we're on the right path, or do you think we need another evolution?
For me personally, I hope things change, not in the sense of the form of comics or the subjects of comics, but more in the creators. I hope there will be more diversity in the creators, because I still feel there's a lot of white people making comics and there's a lot of men making comics, but I really miss the women and the people of color. And I mean, there's not much you can do, but just hope that those people will find their way into comics, and that it will be more diverse.
Just so you know, you are very important for that.
I wouldn't say so, but
no, you are. You create something that women see as a model. You are a model for many kids, whether you like it or not. Let me give you a perfectly horrible example. When I get asked what's your favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, I said, you're asking favorite, or you're asking the one that I think is more important? Because for me, the one that is more important is Captain Marvel.
Right.
Because that's the one my kid says, 6-year-old, and feels empowered by. Or by black people, the success of Black Panther was because they saw a hero of their own color.
Right.
Women see you, they see Natasha Bustos, they see Ana Miralles, they see, Kelly Sue DeConnick in the US, or Gail Simone, and they're seeing role models. They're seeing they can do it, so can I. So I know I'm putting a lot of responsibility in you. And same with gay creators or creators of color. By the end of the day, you are people they relate to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I hope there will be more people like that in the future. I mean, in Europe, we still have a long way to go. So.
Yeah, there's too many of us. Too many white guys, white male.
You can stay. I just need more.
That you can stay goes for you, Reinhard, not me. So what do you think, my friend?
Yeah, basically the same. I see that we are on the right track at the moment. That when I see festivals in the last time, that it's a much bigger variety of artists and themes of books, and for example, the last comic festival we had in Germany, the big festival in Erlangen, the Comic Salon, there was a stage for gay comic creators, and that was the first time that something like that happened, and it was packed with people watching it. So the interest is really, really huge, and I'm happy that when you do a comic book about gay people, or when you do a comic book about race scene, then it seems that there is a much bigger audience for that than it was 10, 20 years ago, and where people said, oh yeah, it's a good subject, yeah, we publish it, but yeah, it would sell like 100 times and that's it. But now there's a much bigger audience, and also there's a much bigger attention in the media about those subjects, and comic books are a perfect way to treat difficult sociological, historical, political issues and you can use comic books in education, in the public attention, and that's more and more people are getting there, and also institutions are getting there. And I think that's a very, very good path that we're on there.
Mm-hmm. But do you think the readership wasn't there, or the publisher weren't ready to go in that direction?
I think it was both. I think it was the publishers were scared because they were afraid that the books might not sell, and they would sit on the costs in the end. And then there was readers that said, well, yeah, comic books is not so interesting because there's just funny or superhero stuff. Mm-hmm. And now it's, well, I'm speaking for Germany in that case. There's institutions like, for example, the Goethe Institute. They were very much on the forefront on promoting German comic books in the world and using them in their education system, and also to organize events, to invite German artists and promote not only German comic books but comic books in general in the world. And I think that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. But it's this really weird situation for me, for example, because as a con guy, because I hate with all my heart doing panels like, how does it feel to be a woman in comics, or how does it feel to be a gay, transgender, lesbian, blah 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 in comics. At the same time, I hate it.
Yeah, they're more interesting questions than that.
I feel for the people. I feel for the women. I feel for the gay guys. I feel for the lesbian. Like, if I were in this position, and then they confirm it to me when I asked him, "Did you like to be in those pants?" I fucking hate it. I just want to be another creator, and then we stop with this. It's black. It's white. It's a man. It's a woman. It's a lesbian. It's a gay guy. Like, why does it matter? Creation is what's important.
Yeah. Then ask him what kind of brush he uses. Do you, as a gay person, use a different brush than the heterosexual person? So,
no,
that would be interesting.
but I was like, do you guys hate that? When you get into a compartmentalized into a certain group to talk about something?
Well, I get asked that question a lot, and
okay, sorry.
I always think, well, maybe I should now, be the smart person here and say, well, what's it like to be a man in the comic book industry? Because then they will notice that there's no difference in, there's absolutely no difference. And for me, I've always been treated very well. I was lucky, I guess. I was always just one of the guys, so to say. But I do feel that I should, show my face and go to festivals also, because, like you said earlier, David, there need to be some role models. And I feel like if we just come out and we show ourselves, then it's easier for other people who visit those festivals, like teenagers, people who want to become comic book artists themselves. They need to see that it's possible. But still, I feel that there's, now the last couple of years, there's way more women in the industry, and I'm so happy to see that. But I'm still missing a lot of voices. Still,
mm-hmm.
I'm missing a lot of queer voices. I'm missing a lot of people of color. So I still feel there's a long way to go. But I'm glad, for example, in Canada and the US, there's a huge queer scene in the comic book scene, and it's so inspiring. Those people, they are not your average comic book audience. They're very colorful and they're very loud and they're very, passionate about everything they do. And it's so different from the traditional comic book audience of, the man wearing glasses and having long hair and the nerdy type, But it's so fun to see, that is a scene in the same genre. They all love comics. So that's for me, it's very inspiring, and I really love to go to those kind of festivals like TCAF or SPX, for example. They're the festivals that really focus on those books. So
Yeah.
So don't lose hope.
No, not at all. I was just in your same train when you said about needing new voices. That's why I think we're growing, because every new voice gets a new reader that was there, fucking waiting for the last 30 years to hear what they wanted to read. And I'm not saying we have all that in novels, which is not true. There's a lot of novels that also need to go in that direction, or theater, hear new voices. We are tired. I am tired of always hearing the same voices.
Yeah.
What kept me in comics years ago was in part this one, like getting Alan Moore, getting Frank Miller, getting European creators, getting the new voices who just said, fuck it. I'm not going to tell the same story again. I'm going to go to tell the stories I would like to read. So what you just said about the new creators is the same with creators of color. I want to read them. I want to listen to them, because I know that's going to make only our media is going to make it much richer.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say you can't stop the future, because that's the future. And 2 weeks ago, I had another female creator here, and I got asked that question. Are you going to ask her, how is it being a woman in comics? And I got so angry that I put the ad for her, in the ad I said, no, I'm not going to ask her how it's going to be a woman in comics, because I couldn't ask you how is it going to be a man in comics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reinhard?
It was as a gay person. It was in the comic scene in the beginning. It was not an issue for me. I didn't make it a subject in my stories because I just didn't have the right story for that. And more and more, I came to the point that I was putting gay characters in my stories. Like in the Fidel Castro book, I have a gay gay guerrilla. And I thought that is actually much more important than just than making a book and saying, okay, this is a gay book, and then you're only in the gay section. And I didn't want that. I wanted to have the gay character in a book about somebody where you don't expect that. And but I don't think that was the right way. So with the last book that I made, Knockout. It's a story about the gay boxer, and I really had something in my mind that I wanted to tell because I've seen what social backlash there is in America, and there's also in Germany and in other countries in the world, and there were so many rights that we were fighting for during the last decades, and slowly there are people coming into power that want to take that away from us. And so I wanted to make a book that is actually helping to stop that. So that's that was my main goal in doing the book about India Griffith.
But there's also a side of course, the books that by queer people or people of color that are, of course, vindication of rights, which are necessary, absolutely necessary, I think. There's also the other side, which I think connects with what Aimee was saying. If it doesn't, just correct me, which is that even if they don't talk, if you don't talk, if Aimee doesn't talk about those rights, it's a different voice. We are getting a voice that wasn't there before, because it's a different vision of life. My life is not the same as a black guy in the middle of fucking Arizona. if I can get that voice, he's going to tell me things that I would never have thought about that way. You know, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I want I want those visions of life that I've never had, or I could never see if I don't get those comic books.
Yeah, but that's a dangerous topic, I think, because then if you would make it more extreme, you would say that I could only make comics about female Asian girls living in Holland, which is not true.
Absolutely.
I can, you know, as an author, I can do my research and I can, you know, try to adapt to a character and try to think about what would this character do in that position. And I think, for example, Nate Powell made a trilogy, March, about the rights and the very famous march for the rights of Black people. And he did that perfectly. I mean, he's not Black, but he did that perfectly because he really went into that community and he talked to people in that community. And he made it together with people who are very, very important in that whole era and still alive, and actually people who were there at the march. So I think that it's very dangerous to say that you cannot really have the same voice as someone. It's a difficult topic, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
You're definitely right. You will never get so close as to a personal story, but you can still address.
No, absolutely, I agree. But I wasn't being literal in the sense that only that person can tell me that story.
Right.
But as an example, I was talking to Ruben Pellejero, you know, who's doing Corto Maltese now.
Yeah.
When we're talking, and I was telling the first time I was in America, you know, in first and only, I was in like deep America. You understand a lot of things if you're there, which is, you know, like the distance between farms or houses, or they don't see anybody in like 6 months. So you get why they don't trust other people. You start to understand. You never justify it, but you start to understand many things, and that's why I when I went to New Orleans first time, second time I went, J.D. Jones, you know, was also there. He's from New Orleans, and I didn't see things the same way until I was with him, and he explained some subtleties that I didn't understand about. Don't go in that direction, go in this direction, because in this direction is going to be more dangerous, and in this other, even if they look the same. And why? The subtleties. That's why I mean with, even if I can put myself in that position, that voice is always going to be more natural because he's from there. And it's going to give me some subtle details that even if he's not talking about his homeland or anything like that, that voice is going to be unique because he's affected by where he grew, what he grew up with, etc., etc. That's what I meant. I don't know if I'm making more sense now. I mean,
yeah, you do. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's so sometimes it's those little details that also make up the truthfulness of a story. I don't think I could have done the Fidel Castro book when I've been in Cuba for 1 month doing research because I got so many first-hand information and also so much atmosphere and things from the street. And something else came to my mind. I do a lot of workshops with the Goethe Institute with comic artists all over the world, and sometimes I go to countries where it's very difficult for young artists, like Sudan, for example. I did workshop there, or other Arabic countries that have difficult situation. And I always look for artists that maybe they have something like a voice, that they do use comic books to report about their country. And I always encourage them to do something like that. It's really difficult. And I remember that I talked to somebody in Sudan about, so why don't you use comic books to tell something about your country? People in Germany, in Europe, they would be totally interested to hear a voice from Sudan. And he was doing like something like manga things. And then he said to me, Reinhard, I'm living in this country. I have to deal with this shit every day. When I work, I want to do something different. So I'm telling different stories, and I really couldn't understand it. I think it's kind of a pity, but I really can understand what he was saying, that he also wanted to use comic to escape from his situation.
Yeah, but that takes us back to the beginning. There's a story you don't want to talk about, which is the pandemic.
Yes.
No, I'm not kidding. I don't want to tell the story of the shit I live every day.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's the same thing.
And you at the beginning said the pandemic is not the story we want to tell right now. So maybe when he gets out of that shit, being moving out of Sudan, or growing away from it, or getting older and getting some distance, he will tell that story. Or maybe you guys will tell the story of the pandemic, how you lived the pandemic, or how you saw it, blah blah blah, in a few years. But now it's not the time.
Yeah, maybe that's my thing after David Bowie then.
Yeah.
No.
I was going to say, stay away from that, from your own, to save your own mind from exploding, but up to you. So anyway, it's 119 minutes, so 2 hours in a minute. So,
wow.
And you guys have a life.
Yeah, kind of.
You're old.
Kind of.
Yeah, you do. Don't say stupid things. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please don't cut. I want to say
thank you for having us.
after I get all that people away. But to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Tomorrow with us, Spanish writers Hernán Migoya and El Torres. And to you, Reinhard, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure as always.
And thank you so much, Amy, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
It's been my honor. And to all of you, see you tomorrow. Goodbye. Saying goodbye in 3, 2, 1.